We're streaming these days, or trying to. So if you ever can't make it, look for the in the Orlando Dev Slack. Anyway, yeah. So Victor Boutte is going to speak tonight on reactive extensions with React. But before that, a couple housekeeping things. Our sponsors want to give appreciation for them. So One Big Vision, which is where we are. Louis is here from Big Vision. A few other folks that work here to accommodate us. They accommodate us every month. Appreciate that. Tech Systems is our sponsor for food and beverages. Julian is here from Tech Systems. You want to come and introduce yourself?
Hey guys, I'm Julian. So I know all from this charm. So it's basically the alternating between myself and Jim Kim, who will be the Tech Systems representatives here. I actually live out in Melbourne, so coming out here is quite the trek. But it's really cool kind of to see this, and especially be in this kind of environment, because I know in my county, this is what they want to be. This is a technology they're really interested in, so I'm really excited to learn as much as
So Tech Systems is a talent agency, and if you need a job, then Julian might be able to help you out. So you can talk to him about that. So our speaker, Victor Boutte, is someone I had the pleasure of working with at Disney. He's a really talented developer, smart guy. He's a software engineer now at Fat Merchant, which is well represented here tonight. He's got the whole squad with him, so don't say anything bad about Fat Merchant. Do we have anything else, Matt, before Victor comes up?
Yes. Who are you guys? This is like the most well-attended meetup we've had.
Yeah.
Sorry. What are you doing here? It's raining. So just real quick, like, help me. What's happening?
Is it?
Who are you?
So I know.
Fat Merchant guys over here.
Right, we've got a group of Fat Merchant people. There's like at least 5 people from Fat Merchant.
That's awesome.
Are there any other groups?
Is there a group? Is there another group that's rolling in here? No kidding. Okay.
You said you're professor at UCF?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, our professor.
Nice.
Cool.
All right, it's big time.
Any other groups? Yeah, we have other Yes. Oh, neat. Oh, yeah, I've heard of you. That's neat. Okay, that's a little. Thanks.
So if you're new here, if you're kind of like new to the developer community in Orlando, if there is such a thing, we do have an Orlando developers Slack, which is a really great place to like find out about things that are happening in Orlando with regards to computer science and development and jobs and all that stuff. So if you don't know what that is, or you do know what it is, but you're not on it, you can see me or Matt or Louis or whoever afterward, and we'll be happy to get you invited to that so you can get into that. Definitely like introduce yourself, if you're trying to get a job or whatever. That's one of the reasons we do these things, is to bring people together. Say something else too. Oh, React Rally was last week. That's a big conference in the React world. Some really good talks there. They're all on YouTube now. You just Google it. It's pretty easy to find. There's a new React feature coming up called React Suspense. We'll probably do a talk about pretty soon. So check that out. But React Rally, yeah, definitely get on that. All right, Victor.
Yeah, like Matt said, it's a really good turnout. So thank you guys for coming out.
You didn't tell us you were famous.
No. Okay, so all right, so RxJS. Here's the agenda of what we're going to get into. We're going to talk about the fundamentals of RxJS. These $20 words: observable, streams, emissions, notifications. What the heck is that stuff? How it fits into the scope of a React app, and I'm going to talk through some use cases of potential issues that Rx can help solve rather elegantly. So what is RxJS? So it's the JavaScript implementation of ReactiveX, and on the website, this is how they have it, an API for asynchronous programming with observable streams. What does that even mean? Really, it's just a library that helps us with programming with event streams. And what's event streams? They're a sequence of events that can happen over a period of time. So think of it as a collection that can have elements added to it in an asynchronous fashion, and those elements can come in on a stream with any amount of values, and they're dynamically added over any amount of time. And we want our code to react to that. And that last part is important because at a very high level, this is known as reactive programming. And there's certainly more to reactive programming than what I'm going to get into that exceeds the scope of this topic, but at a high level, just focus on that part. So, streams and observables. Streams are a sequence of events that happen over a period of time, which is what I just mentioned before. And if you ever haven't seen one, this is a marble diagram. And what it is the marbles that you see are signifying events that are being emitted from a stream. And the events are known as emissions. So in the slide before you saw on the agenda, what is emissions and notifications? So every time our stream passes one of these events along, that's known as an emission. If an error occurs along the way, this is known as a notification. And this line that you see at the very end is known as the completion. So once all of the events have been emitted in the stream, it's going to complete naturally, unless you force it to. So we want to observe what's happening in the stream. And for this example, we just care about every event that's greater than 10. So this bit down at the bottom is known as the observer contract. Up here is our observable stream, and what links the two together is known as a subscription. So observables are lazy in the sense that they won't emit any events until you subscribe to them. So you won't get anything from it without subscribing. So there's a lot of information to take in, and I do have one more slide with more info. Before I do, though, I'm going to jump into some code to show you guys what this looks like. And I might have to blow this up. Oh, I guess that's not that bad. Let me blow this up a little bit. Too much. All right, can you guys see that? Or should I zoom in a little more?
Zoom in on the left.
Sure. Okay, cool. All right, so we'll start simple, right? We'll go with the counter. So I'm gonna draw your attention to this up here first. This is our subject, and it's just a type of an observable stream. And think of it like an event emitter, where we can control when we want it to emit new values. So we have our counter there, and then if we jump into the render, this is where we're actually going to trigger stuff to happen. So whenever I click on plus or minus, it's going to change the state, which is what you would expect. And here we're starting with an initial total of 0. And if you look at the code, we have this this next method, which is provided to us via the subject up here. And I'm going to get into this method in a little bit more in just a second. But for now, just think of it as that's what's responsible for producing that next value in the stream. So if we look at component did mount, here we're reacting to it. So we're saying subscribe to this subject up here. And anytime a value is emitted, I want to set my state based off that. So I'm going to pause. Any questions so far? Yeah.
I just got here, so maybe you already covered this. Is there a reason you're using a subject instead of an observable?
Well, the only reason I'm using it now is just for the sake of clarity. I do have one in here where I actually created an observable from scratch. So I'll go over that in just a second though. Yeah, no problem. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is pause and jump back to the slides real quick and compare promises to observables and how they're different. Cool. So a promise, as you all know, I'm sure you've worked with, it can resolve or reject at a future date, right? So a promise may produce a single value sometime in the future. Think of it as like an HTTP request. It might resolve with a value like a list of movies, or it might reject with the reason why it couldn't resolve. And this is just a simple Axios call just to kind of show you. We're checking Rastamonster's profile and seeing what repositories he has. So observables are very similar in the context of waiting for something to resolve in the future. Difference is, though, that instead of waiting for a single value, we can wait for multiple values to resolve within the same request, which is pretty powerful. And I'll demo that for you in just a second. So instead of the dot then and catch callbacks, with observables, we get 3 new methods. We get next, error, and complete. So your next is going to get called whenever we emit a new value. So like the example that I just showed, whenever we were calling .next on the increment and decrement buttons, that's what was producing the values. Error, if anything happens along the way, this method takes a parameter that indicates what caused that error. And important note, if error fires off, it will not, you won't be able to call complete. It'll stop the stream. So complete is only called after the final emission happens, or if it hasn't encountered any errors along the way. So what I'm going to do before I move on to the next component is I'll show you what it looks like if we manually fire off that error and complete. So I'm going to open up my console here. And then right in here, this first fat arrow function that you see is actually the next method. So I'll hit a comma there, and then right after that is your complete. So in complete, you don't pass in a value. So now what I'm going to do is just going to replicate this button right here, call it error. I'm going to make it complete as well. Cool. So now if I click my plus, my minus, that still works. If I want to replicate what an error would look like, you'll see that it errored out. And if I click plus or minus, nothing's happening. Can't complete it. So again, if I refresh, go to plus, minus, no errors have occurred. So I can call complete, and that too is finished now. So the observable has stopped. Any questions so far? Yeah.
In the closure view, that you put error, just put the parentheses, why would you recognize that actually?
Sure, let me go to the code. You're talking about right here, where I called this?
Yeah.
Here as well? Oh, I see. Are you asking because here I'm passing a value? Or are you just asking about these here?
I'm asking about the complete function.
Okay. So,
We didn't mark it out with the
right. Okay, so next, error, and complete is what's given to you by subject. So whenever you tap into those and you expect any logic to happen there, this is where you would define that logic. So for here, the second, it's just the order in which you define them. So the second method is going to be your error, and the third is going to be your complete. And here in this block, you could do literally whatever you wanted. Just consoling it out for the sake of demoing it. Does that answer your question?
A little bit, like I guess in your traditional JavaScript, when you have a function, equals whatever.
Right. Like a declaration. Yeah. I'm only.
That doesn't require you to leave it, but I just thought it was weird that you picked it up anyway.
Sure. Yeah, so what he's saying is that, like, traditionally you would see something like up here, like complete, as function, is a function, and then we have a reference to that, and we're using that. But because we're tapping into the APIs provided by subject, which is the next error and complete, it'll know within my subscription here, and this is my observer contract, so it'll know in here if I declare a third method right here, that's going to be the complete. Good question. All right, so I'm gonna move on from the counter and show you guys the next thing. Cool. So we'll implement a simple to do. I'll close that. Okay, so similar concept up here, we're declaring our subjects. Here in the state, we have empty array, input value, it's nothing. I'll jump back to the component did mount in just a second. So in the code here, whenever an on change happens in that synthetic event, we're gonna emit that value right here. Whatever the target value is, we're gonna push that through the stream, and then we'll react to it within the component did mount. So same thing here with as we enter them and we hit add to list, it's going to react to that and it's going to here in update to do item. Nope, sorry. Here it is, right above the mapping. It'll add that to the list, and then if there is anything in it, I'm just checking my state to see if I have anything, and then render this if it does. Right. So here, if we have Joe, Tom, Steve. So it functions just how we would expect. Cool. Now, you might say like, all right, I could do this with regular React. I don't know why that, is so cool and why I should even learn that. But why do you have these things declared up here outside of the class? Great question. So we could actually share this across multiple components, right? So nowhere in this application am I going to use Redux. I'm not even going to use the new context API. All I'm doing is declaring it outside of the scope of the component. So we could even have like our own utilities, our own folder over here that has all of the subscriptions and just import them into the components that care about it. So if I come here and I create a new component, here we're going to import that subscription from the other model. Sorry, the other component. So I'm going to subscribe to it so that I can get that value. And then inside of my render, what I want to do is pull out the state. So cool. Now the last thing to do for this is to import it into our app. Cool. Now whatever I type in here, automatically reacting. So this is really cool because I don't know if you've ever played with Redux and have been new to it. It could be like really aggravating to try and set all that up. We're not worried about any reducers or actions. And the context API is really cool, and this could also work well with that. So they do have, I think it's called reactive, Redux observables. So the folks over at Netflix have created a Redux version of this that you could use to handle asynchronous calls, which is pretty sweet. Any questions about what I did to hook up the two? Yeah.
I have a question that's not quite about that. I was wondering, so you said that you could use this sort of like store. However, if like as one further down the line, like maybe that like you get put new pages and that new one is rendered, will it have like will it know about all of these values that are
Right, so that's a good question. So whenever you subscribe to a subscription across multiple components, it'll hold on to, in a registry, what the previously emitted value was. If you want that component to care about any previously emitted values before the current one, you would have to do so in the state of that component. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'll ask you about it at work.
Okay. Cool. All right, so I did the same thing here in this reactive component. And you can see that they're both updating on the fly. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Do you mind walking through the to-do list? It looks like is it accurate to say you have multiple streams? All those
Yes. Yeah, I do.
all those at the top are individual streams. And what motivated you to create different streams? Is it the types of events in each stream are different?
So it's a great question. You don't have to do it that way. I just did it to show you that you could use multiple streams in the same component and they can play nicely with each other. But no, you're not obligated at all to make everything a stream. And I certainly wouldn't recommend that. Like you might go home and say, okay, Rx is pretty cool. Let me start doing that. Don't Rx all the things because your future self is going to hate you. So yeah. Any other questions about this component? Yeah.
I noticed that you make your subjects branch scope the module.
Yeah.
And I would figure in production most people probably do it more in the, like the API call models or libraries or something like that. Where do you in practice store your subjects? Like do you store them in context or do you store them like are they imported from some?
Right. So do you mean like in the scope of the project architecture?
Yes. Like
Sure.
where do they usually come from?
Yeah, so I think what a nice practice is to have them, just like you have your components and your styles, is to have like your own folder at the same level within the source folder. So you would have your subjects here, or you can call up subscriptions or observables, whatever works well for you and your code base and the team, but just talk with them there. And that's where I would put it so that you could import it in any other component that you needed to.
Okay. So
Yeah.
really their application local sense.
Yeah, essentially. Was there another question? Yeah.
I noticed you anchor subjects and you put a dollar sign. Is that like a
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that. So this is known as Finnish notation. The guy who popularized it, I think his name's Andrew Stoltz. I apologize if I pronounced that wrong. But anyhow, yeah, so the reason why they do that is so that you can clearly see if you jump into a new code base and you're familiar with Rx anyways, you know what streams right away. So another practice that used to be a thing apparently is called Hungarian notation. So before TypeScript was a thing, in Hungarian notation, you would have like the prefix to every variable, like what type that was. So if it's a number, you would have an N and then like camel case, whatever that variable is, or a string S. So this is similar to that. It's just like a clear way to quickly see like, all right, that's a string, so I know what's going on. Because here at the declaration, you know what it is, but later in the code base, or if you're importing it somewhere else, you're like, oh, what the heck's going on? The first time I saw it, I was like, what is this jQuery? All right, so I'll move on to the next thing. So we'll blow away these. All right, I think I'm overlapping there. Okay, so in this component, here, let me get away. Here I'm declaring the observable within my component did mount. I could certainly do it the same way that I've been doing. And here I'm not importing subject. I'm actually creating the observable from scratch. And I'm just implementing a simple interval that'll use the faker library that I pulled in to always make a new person every time, every 1500 milliseconds. Here, I'm subscribing to this, and I'm piping through these operators. Here's some special operators. Let me jump up at the top real quick. So I'm using observable, I'm using interval, I'm using skip until, and I'm using take. I'm going to explain exactly what those do. So on did mount, we want to create a new observable, and we want to emit a new employee every 1500 milliseconds, and then we're going to pipe those values. We're going to skip every 3000 milliseconds, and we're only going to take 3. So without this take here, it's going to keep going as long as it can. And with take, what I'm saying is all I care about is the first 3 and then stop the stream. So whenever that happens, it's going to call complete. So if I get rid of this and the component refreshes, you'll see that it just keeps going. So we pause for a little bit, we wait, and just keep submitting. I'll bring it back because that can be distracting.
So that skip until just meant don't ignore the observables until 3 seconds have passed.
Exactly. Don't start at mid values until this 3000 milliseconds have passed.
Question.
Yeah.
The skip until and take, are those like defined like functions?
They are functions, but I'm importing them from Rx.
Just like for sake of argument, why not have those as like the arguments to the library? What if it took an argument that was an object, and then you had, skip until property, take until property? Why are they functions per se?
If you're asking why they implement it like that in the library, I'm not sure. I think it's just because, so in Rx up here, you have everything that you import here is a type of observable. Everything that you do here is an operator. So your observables are different ways of producing values through a stream. And then your operators are things that you can chain onto those that will transform the values in any way that you want, or it'll define the behavior in which you want that contract to execute. So the way that they pitch it as well is that RxJS is like the Lodash for handling streams.
I only ask because I wasn't used to that sort of notation. So,
Sure. Yeah.
Can you define again what pipe does?
Sure. So pipe is like a higher order function. It's going to take in all of these and apply it to this stream here that we're subscribing to. So in the order too that you describe it. So we want to skip first, and then after we've skipped, all we want to do is take the 3.
So it's like transforming that observable.
Exactly.
And does it take like a list of?
Yeah, you can keep passing in as many as you want. There's another one in here, like when you're developing, you can use, I think it's called do, and it's just an identity function. It's going to pass through exactly what's happening at that step of the iteration. Yeah. Cool. So now I'm going to jump into a switch map and what that is.
Real quick question. So
Yeah.
when you were piping, what's the term actions, or what's the term for the functions?
Operators?
Operators.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're piping operators onto a stream. Does that leave the original stream? Does it mutate the original stream, or are those? Yeah, or are they? Is the original stream left alone?
Yes, the original stream is left alone.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not mutating it. So yeah, you're right.
With that same stream, you can have like you can have done another pipe under that, and then something else to the same stream.
Exactly. Yeah, there's another one called map2 where you could actually like map the value. So in the first example that I showed you guys the counter on the marble diagram, we could actually use map2 within the pipe to like multiply it by 2 or what have you. And then it'll give us that new value at the end. Did you have a question? Oh, you did. It is. Wait, no, pipe's just yeah, it's just a method through I think probably ES6 that you could tap into. Yeah, it's not for Rx. Yeah.
Can you show me where to find the operator so that I can know where they exist? Like, how do I know that skip until is available?
Yeah, sure. I can totally show you that. So there's a great resource available to anybody jumping into Rx, and it's called learnrx.io. And here you could see a list of all the operators, what they do, as well as like different types of observables. So if I come in here and I look at the tape, it's a quick description of what it is, when you might like to use it, some examples with JFBin and JS Fiddle. So it's really helpful. And then at the bottom, on most of these, you have a link to the docs, and you also have a link to like videos that show people implementing. Yeah.
And ReactiveX is a thing in other languages too, right? So if I want to use this in like Rx Swift, it'll be the same operators.
Will they be the same operators? I'm not sure, because this is for RxJS, but the paradigm itself is language agnostic, and you can use it across multiple languages, which makes that really powerful in itself too. Yeah.
So my company uses RxJS, and so far it looks like they use the same operator.
Yes.
Oh, really?
That's why I said it.
Sick.
Have you seen Rx marbles?
I was actually going to show that.
Okay.
So I'll just show that now. It's a great thing that he brought up. So if you're curious about like what some of these do, you can actually come to RX Marbles, and it'll show you an interactive marble diagram that you could slide and see like what the result of that would be. So these are really good resources to play around with as you learn this stuff, because this is a paradigm shift in how we usually do things. So there's definitely a learning curve. All right, cool. So if I jump back to my example. Goodbye, Paul.
Oh, I have.
Yeah.
And there's also the RxJS. That's like the agnostic script document for Rx. Saying that.
What was it?
It's if you search Google of RxJS,
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of like the agnostic version, because I've noticed that a lot of things are RxJS
Yeah.
tools. But I find that the RxJS is agnostic. state.
Yeah, so ReactiveX is like the Bible of all observable functions and operators. RxJS is just an implementation of that. And on that site as well, you can find like for Swift or what have you. Dan, what's up?
What's your favorite option?
Favorite operator? I wouldn't say that I have a favorite operator, but my favorite observable stream that I could use, I think right now at the moment is switch map, which is what I'm about to show. So with switch map, what happens is we say that first we have an observable stream, and then we're going to switch off of the values from there. So you have two streams connected. You have your original one that, in this example, makes a call to the Star Wars API, and it gets values, right? And then the next thing that I'm going to tag onto that is a switch map. And what happens is it says, whenever this is completed and this is resolved, then run this other stream. So what's happening here is the first call that I make is going to reach out and grab a character. And then it's going to reach out and take that result and grab the planet that that character is from. So why is this useful? As developers, we integrate with third-party vendors all the time. And sometimes their APIs are not very clean. And depending upon how they have it architected, you might have to make a call and grab some resource and then make another call. And then you have like the result that you need. So with switch map and other observables like this, it makes that like pretty easy to do and reason about. So if we look at the code, our first stream here is the character stream, and it's calling from. This I'm importing from RxJS. And all it's saying is just like, make this HTTP request and then give me the values. So my home planet is my next stream, and I'm going to use pipe again. And what I want to do is switch map. I'm going to use switch map. And this C right here is the value of what gets emitted from character stream. I'm highlighting the code, and I don't even know if you can't see it. All right. So inside of the switch map, I have some logic. So I say Star Wars dude is going to be equal to C, whatever's been emitted from the first stream, and I'm going to set my state off of that. And then finally, I'm going to return the planet as well. And then here I subscribe to the planet, the second stream, and then I set my state accordingly. So loading is true whenever it first runs, and it runs through the first call to the character, and loading's still true because I care about whenever the second stream resolves. And then I set it to false, and then I'm showing everything. So one of the ways that I'm using this at work is we have this third-party vendor that we integrate with for doing like underwriting stuff, right? But the way that their API is constructed, I can't make two calls at the same time. I have to wait for one to resolve, and then I could use that information to make the next call. So this like works perfect for me. Any questions about switch map and how it works? Cool.
Switch map returns a new stream.
So switch map you would use to attach to another stream, and then yes, it'll return the final result.
Can you scroll up to the switch map call again?
Yeah, sure. So another thing I should mention, because this pipe can be a little confusing, you don't have to use pipe. You could just use dot switch map at the end of character string. I'm using pipe so that it's just a matter of preference, because I could chain on switch map, and then at the end of switch map I can chain on delay. Yeah. Cool, so I have one more component to go over with you guys. So this one we're going to use a fork join. All right, so in fork join, what's different about this from switch map is think of it like a promise.all. So emit all of these asynchronously, and once they've all resolved, then give me the results of that. So we have a character stream, we have a planet stream, and we have a film stream, and it's making these calls at the same time. Here we put them in a collection. So we say Star Wars results. And then in fork join, you pass in all of the subscriptions that you care to subscribe to. And once, like I said, all of them have been resolved, then in here you could do what you want with the results. Now, something to note is that the results that I pass in from that stream, I have to grab the indexes. So you have to know which order you put it in. Unless you don't care. Like if you're hitting the same resource, you could just spread in all the results. Cool. Any other questions? Yeah.
Then you do it more than 2 subscriptions to use for. Switch only limited to 2 subscriptions.
Okay, good question. So if you care about one resolving before the other and you need something from that first one, you could use switch map. You don't even have to take a value emitted from that first subscription. If you just want it to happen sequentially, then you can wait for it to resolve, and then you can perform your next logic bit. And then for fork join, it's just like if you want all of them to resolve before you do anything with results, you would use that. Yeah.
So when you create an observable, it's not like, I guess it is kind of asynchronous. It goes from step to step, but if you do an API call, like on one of the next methods, it doesn't wait for an API call before going to the next step, right? Where you have to use something like fork join or you know, basically within the next call.
Yeah.
I guess I'm trying to understand, like, now that I see fork join, I think I understand a little more, but
Yeah.
it's like if I need to do a bunch of API calls, normally I do a basic wait style call.
Yeah.
You know, the observables, I'm going to do that for me by default, just by putting a bunch of like calls to the next methods. I have to do something like fork join.
So for your next methods are going to be declared within the observer contract. So you have your observable stream. So in this case would be like however many API calls that you need to make. Those are streams themselves. So what you would do is, if you look up here, I'm just sticking them in a from. So I would take, the from is an observable. This is where it gets hairy because you have observables of observables, and it's weird. But I'm just saying all of these are separate streams, and once they've all completed, then I care about grabbing the results. So it will wait if you use this this observable stream. Fork join anyways, will wait for all of them to complete.
Right, but by default, like if I was to just do an Axios call or just an API request within like an X or something, it's not going to wait for the call to finish or goes to the next step. Like I have to actually.
So okay, so I think I get your question now. If you declare an observable from scratch, like we did in the other component, so I think it's observable.create, and then you pass in what you want to happen there. Yes, you could do your Axios calls there in the next, and whenever they resolve, depending upon what you use, like fork join, it will wait for them to resolve. Yeah. Any other questions? Cool. So jump back into my notes real quick. So I believe that was the last slide, and I just wanted to share with you guys some additional resources. Some of the guys were familiar with Rx, so they already talked about a couple. We have the Marvels, Learn Rx. Here's some great YouTube series on understanding this a little bit more. I'm actually going to share with in Slack the repo for all of this code. So if that's your thing, you want to jump in there and like play with it, certainly welcome you to do so. And yeah, guys, that's it. Thanks for coming out. All right.
Thanks, man.
Thank you. I don't know how we're doing on time. Did I blow through that?
Great.
Okay.
Perfect.
Sweet.
It's like probably 40 minutes. Perfect.
Oh, I do have one more thing to say. So over at Fat Merchant, some of the squads here, and we also have our VP of Talent in the back. This is PJ. Over at Fat, a lot of things are happening. It's exciting. It's a startup. We just closed our Series C funding round, which I think we had like, what, 10.5 million investment. So at the moment, we're not looking to fill a dev slot, but potentially very soon we will be. So if you're, curious about it, certainly talk to PJ. She has a lot more details to spread on that. All right. Sweet. Again, guys, thank you for coming out. Sweet.